Hello and welcome to Cinema Subculture, the channel where we discuss everything strange, obscure, and downright messed up in the world of movies. My name's Gary.
And I'm Simon. So, Gary, Merry Christmas, I
Merry
guess.
Christmas, Simon.
um, for our Christmas episode, what film are we going to be talking about today?
Don't Open Till Christmas, a 1984 British slasher film in which a Santa Claus killer is on the loose in London.
Yes, right, okay.
So, Simon, is this one you'll be putting on your Christmas list or one you'll be
Well,
returning on Boxing Day?
well, let's wait. Let's get there. Yeah, let's build some suspense. Let's not give away all the treats too early, Gary.
Cool.
Um, don't open till Christmas, as I say.
Indeed.
So yeah, traditionally, I think I've kind of tended to pick these Christmas episodes, these films. What in this instance, it was yourself that picked this film. What led you to this specifically?
Um, I mean, we've done quite a few Christmas horror films over the years. There's
Yeah,
not that many of them. So you just digging through. I think I saw
yeah,
this on a list of weird Christmas movies or something like that to that
yeah.
effect.
Check it out.
That's like another Christmas slasher, may as well. Why
Yeah,
not?
worth giving a wee try. I've
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
admit, you sent me the trailer. From the makers of Friday the 13th,
Oh yes.
playing the trailer, and I'm looking through the credits and I'm thinking, who the fuck that made this film worked on Friday the 13th? I don't know any of these names, and
Right,
I've googled it, and I've just found that, like, before we started recording tonight, the kind of the explanation for it.
right.
But yeah, it's fair to say that there's not much involvement from the makers of Friday the 13th in this film. um, well, I mean, what did you think of it, Gary?
Okay.
What was your thoughts?
Yeah, it is. It's quite mediocre, unfortunately. Quite unusual to see a British slasher
Yeah,
film, actually.
yeah.
I can't really, I don't recall any other ones I've seen. I mean, the only ones maybe Peeping Tom, which was one of
Yeah,
the kind of influences on the slasher genre.
yeah.
But so it's unusual in that regard. But I think it was fairly enjoyable. Unfortunately, I think it feels quite amateurish. It was the director Edmund Purdom, his first role, his first film as a director.
Right.
It's got a feel quite televisual. It feels maybe like a TV movie. Um, it's not particularly cinematic. I think it's notable for being quite sleazy, grimy. It kind of romps along with some fun kills. Um, the who done it aspect to it, as we progress through the film, I did sort of get drawn in a wee bit. I thought it kind of started to work better, but
Yeah.
I think I was finding out the film did have significant production problems. You maybe explain some of the flaws, but
Right. Right.
the as I was researching the film, among slasher fans, seems to be quite well loved, even though it's not particularly great. Yeah, I'm kind of glad I've seen it now. It's a kind of unusual little cheap, like kind of cheap and nasty little British horror film.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll get pretty much the same thoughts on it. That was kind of my instinct initially, was like, oh, this is really kind of cool to see kind of like an 80s like horror film, like slasher set in the UK. So that was really kind of interesting. But I think my takeaway on that same note from this film was it's kind of a shame it wasn't better,
Mm,
because it is kind of cool seeing these kind of like sites that we're more familiar with in this country, right? That like look a little bit more like home. It would have been kind of cool to have that be a good slasher film, or one that could at least kind of ride the up there with some of the kind of classics. Um, yeah, it did. I really got that vibe from it. It felt like a kind of sleazy episode of Columbo or like Murder She Wrote or something like that. That kind of thing. I felt the kills were. I quite liked the first one with the couple in the car with when the circle in the car. I thought that was quite kind of cool and interesting. Um, but the rest of them were all kind of, I don't know, kind of felt quite cheap and nasty. Like, not in a necessarily a good way. I liked the roasted chestnut's
right.
face with the grill, but I don't know. It just felt like in some instances they were going quite sleazy or kind of like not gory, but like they kind of cut away almost or came away from things before it was we get the kills, but that might just be down to the cheapness of it. I too get kind of drawn in with the whodunit. I thought that was actually rather well, like the red herringness of it all was kind of cool. Because at one point I was like, well, it's so obvious what's going on here is and because of the rest of the film, you're like, and so the director is also the main actor essentially, right? And at some point I'm just like, this can't just or I felt like it must just be that. It must be the most obvious thing because it seems like that's the way they're kind of going for things. So when they kind of turned that around a little bit, even after like kind of showing the killer's face almost, because I thought, well, like, are we still meant to be in any doubt here? Because sometimes I watch these older films and you see something and you're like, oh, this is something that you kind of wouldn't have seen either on like a VHS or like even in like a cinema because it's a split second because you can't go back and pause it or something like that, right? But like I felt like, oh, they've given that's the killer's face, like we've just seen the killer, right? Like and you think you know who it is, but I think they managed to kind of misdirect a little bit there, quite well. But yeah, it was fine. I thought the ending was a little bit, I don't know, like when the killer falls, for example, down the stairwell,
Right.
and it's quite a it's quite a ways,
Right.
and then suddenly and then there's a dream thing. It's a bit confusing, but yeah, it was all right. I came away just wishing it had been better for the sake of like UK horror, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think in a way I'm with you there. I think they going back to the kills. I think they're they're quite inventive to a degree, quite fun, not that well executed
Yeah,
in terms of the cinematography or the gore is not effective at all. The blood is extremely cheap looking.
yeah,
But I did enjoy the Santa who got his penis chopped off in the
yeah.
toilet.
That
I
was
thought,
yeah, that was that worked pretty well. I thought, and when the cleaner lady comes in and finds him, I thought that was
right,
quite effective. I thought that looked pretty cool.
yeah,
Um, I thought the kind of spear through the Santa's head was like a cool kind of like almost Friday 13th esque kill, but it just wasn't
mm,
very well executed. And
mm,
yeah, but I don't know. And like, I mean, did you get a Christmassy feel from this other than this? Obviously, there's the Santas, right? Like that's
yeah,
who's being murdered, or at least initially. But I didn't really feel that like Christmas feeling necessarily that I felt from some of these other Christmas slashes we've watched. Um, and the final girl who appears to be the final girl who then just randomly kind of gets killed near the end, and
hmm,
then we switch over to a different kind of final girl
right,
who's like like seems like a throwaway character at first, and then it's like, oh, I don't know. It just because then it becomes like, well, he's not just killing Santas, so what's yeah.
right, yeah. So
um
the kind of basic plot set up is we have the character of Belinda and her boyfriend Jerry. And Belinda's father is doing a Santa Claus appearance, but unfortunately gets a spear through the neck. I think. Is
hold on, who are we talking about here? Belinda?
that no her name? Oh, sorry, that's the actress. That's Belinda
Aye.
Main was the actress. Sorry,
And because I know
Kate
the boyfriend's name's Cliff.
Cliff. Yes.
Yeah, Cliff, the
Uh,
most like vacant, like kind of tedious, like ignorant boyfriend ever. Like, yeah,
right.
sure, we'll just go for some porn. It's fine. You can do this porn shoot. Come on. Get
Cheers
your
you up.
top off. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Um,
Your dad just died yesterday.
yeah.
Push
So the
deal.
death of her father sort of
Mhm.
sparks the police investigation, and they're the sort of two main characters. Um, a police investigation which seems to be quite lackadaisical, not getting a lot of momentum
Yep.
as we go through. Um, the sergeant is it the sergeant or inspector Ian
Yeah,
Harris,
Inspector Harris. Yeah.
played by the director Edmund Purdom.
Hmm.
Now I thought Purdom was probably the best thing in the movie.
Yeah. Hmm.
I thought whenever he was on screen, it was quite good because he's got this kind of classically trained kind of style,
Yeah.
got a kind of booming English voice.
Yeah, he's got the same thing that Pleasance brought to Halloween, right?
Yeah,
He's got this kind of authoritative kind of, oh, that's an actor, that's an actual
yeah.
an actual actor, like, you know.
So I thought he elevated it a bit over the rest of the actors, which were mostly TV actors, as I
Mhm.
understand. And it did feel a bit soap opera kind of ish,
Mm.
with this sort of script and things like that. But Purdom was really good. But unfortunately, his main kind of style of investigation seems to be just wandering about the streets quite a lot, not really doing
Bumpy
much.
into the witnesses, just happen to be at
Yeah,
a marketplace. Oh, it's yourself.
yeah.
That was good, then.
But I thought that actually ended up being one of the benefits of the film when we get this kind of switch into
Mm.
the one of the plot points is Harris the actual killer.
Mm.
He seems to be his the detective underneath him also in the investigation starts to suspect that maybe Harris has been up to
Yeah.
some misdemeanors.
Although
Um,
when the main sorry, when the main girl, Kate, like, kind of brings her concerns up to Powell, he kind of brushes it off, but you're already kind of led to believe that he kind of suspects Harris a little
mm,
bit, and then
yeah,
pretty much in the next scene, he's kind of like, "I thought you had a tracker on Harris, or somebody
yeah.
was watching Harris," and we're like, "We were," but he kind of brushes her off like our concerns are nothing.
Mm,
Oh, I don't think it's him, or like,
yeah.
it's very like kind of thing. But anyway, sorry.
Aye. So, I mean, I don't know how much of this was intentional, but the fact that it moves your suspicion onto Harris is quite interesting, due to the fact that um, sort of halfway through the actual film production, Harris quit the production.
Is that right?
Oh no, sorry, Purdom, the director.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right, aye. Then basically, I think because it was taking so long, I think it was actually in like production for about a year. Actual shooting, it was just getting delayed, and they weren't really getting anywhere to the point where they were actually filming winter and summer.
Right.
Uh, so he quit the
I mean, it's
production. Then they
UK,
did a
so
bunch
it's
of
probably.
script rewrites.
Uh-huh.
Different director came in, but then Purdom eventually came back towards the end. Um, So it actually works reasonably well considering that all that chaos was going on. So I
Yes.
don't know how much what the original script was, how much of the whodunit stuff was intentional or not, but
Mm.
the fact that Harris disappears kind of in the middle of the film actually you
Kind of work.
actually begin to
Yeah.
suspect him a bit more because you start
Uh-huh.
thinking, "Aye, where is this guy?" Like
Yeah.
then there's
Yeah.
this sort of plot thing about, oh yes, he's going to visit his brother. No, the his housemaid's like, he goes to Parklands
Aye.
every Thursday or whatever.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah, so that
and
actually worked quite well.
yeah.
I thought remarkably. Um, but we start finding out that the other principal suspect is Harris's brother Giles, who I
Mm.
did enjoy his presence on camera as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was quite a fun character whenever he was on, quite also quite theatrical in a similar kind of classically trained style, a kind of booming English voice. So I enjoyed that character as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, when we're talking about, like, it's interesting that Harris, so Purdom and Alan Lake, who plays Giles, his brother, they don't have a single scene together. Like, not even a
Yeah,
confrontation at
not
the
I
end.
can remember. Yeah,
Like, you think of these types of film, when you get the hero cop, or at least the kind of main cop, you usually at least get them pulling up at the end, with the guns out or whatever, going, oh my god, it was him, especially given that it's his brother. We don't get any kind of confrontation with those characters, which is kind of interesting. Which would have been explained, I suppose, if Purdon hadn't come back to the production,
mm,
but I wonder if there was some sort of, Purdom left, and then they brought in the other guys as Giles, as a kind of, well, this is the way we're going to finish the film, and
yeah,
that's why they never meet. But because we never even hear him, uh, let Harris reference, like, there's no kind of reveal and confrontation with Harris where he's like, yes, he was my brother, or he did these things, and that's why he's, we don't get anything like that. And he doesn't mention he goes to the Parklands, and so it's very much like just to cover over that cracks. It's interesting that does actually work for the film.
yeah.
You know, that's pretty
Um,
cool.
yeah. saying that though, I think there is big kind of pacing issues, kind of section in the middle, quite nothing much is happening.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's why they had the sort of dance sequence
yeah.
in the
There's a lot of
middle,
filler, isn't there? Yeah,
Caroline Monroe.
yeah,
Yeah, the whole scene section with the Santa going through the London dungeon
yeah,
wasn't really that remarkable.
yeah.
But there's the sort of stripper character, the
Mm-hmm.
young girl who gets
The peep show.
abducted.
Yeah.
She's quite good on screen.
Yeah, yeah. I thought
Um,
again. I thought she was fine. It was just it's interesting again that they with you thinking about it now, given that what you told me about the production, it's almost like a literally two halves of the same film because you have your suspect in Harris Purdom and your main girl with Kate, and then they
mm,
both kind of get offed or disappear partway through the film, and then you get your secondary actual killer and your secondary final girl who's
mhm,
there till the end. That's kind of interesting that and that kind of makes it make a little bit more sense, but it gives it the film that kind of unique kind of turn, I guess, that as I say doesn't necessarily work because I think of the execution of the rest of the film, but it's still kind of interesting. Another feeling I got from this film, as well as like a TV movie, was there was definitely a kind of air of, like for example, the scene where Kate goes to visit Harris in his house, and he invites and it because that relationship gets kind of creepy, weird, a little bit like as if they're becoming romantically entangled.
mm,
Um, it gave me like kind of Hammer horror feelings,
right.
like kind of that kind of tone. Maybe it's just the Britishness of it, but like certainly the production kind of had that kind of schlocky kind of not quite gothic but modern gothic feel to it that some of the kind of 70s and 80s Hammer stuff started to bring in once they moved into the kind of modern era. That was quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, what did you make of that turn? Like, that like they were kind of freezing because again, Cliff's a character that just disappears as well, essentially
Mm,
after being like almost like second or third lead.
yeah,
With these kind of with these there's a topless model that kind of hangs about with them outside their Santa Claus costume.
yeah. Well, Cliff starts to become a suspect as well, doesn't he?
Yeah. But at
Um,
one point, Powell just brings him in and goes, "Yeah, you're no longer a suspect, and you'll never be again. So don't worry about it." And then
yeah.
sends him away.
So is he back in after that?
I don't think so. I think that's the last he's
Aye.
in it.
So I don't know if that was an issue with because they came back for reshoots and they couldn't get
Yeah,
some of the actors back,
maybe
adding to this mad kind of chaos of the plot a wee bit.
because Powell seems to be the only character thinking about it that crosses over between the two halves of the film. He's not really in. He's only in one scene with Giles, but he has the phone call with Giles, and then obviously he's still kind of investigating. He talks to the young girl that from the
Mm,
peep show that witnesses the murder. Um, but yeah, he seems to be the only kind of main character that crosses over between the two different parts of the film.
right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of not having known that and now knowing that the kind of the way the production is, it's really kind of interesting to look at the film like that now. Is if it's these two halves that don't need
Sure.
really even talk to each other, like
Yeah.
but the one bridging character. Really, that's interesting. That is really interesting. Um, but yeah, I don't think it. I don't personally. I don't think it works very well. The film as a whole, I think it has elements that work. I think it has some cool ideas that just aren't capitalized on, and I think I'm quite surprised. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it is just the fun factor. So good, so bad it's good. Of some of it that has made it kind of last and become this kind of cult film. I think it just got a new Blu-ray release in the States by Vinegar
Yeah.
Syndrome. Yeah. Um, and yeah, like so again, a lot of work been put into bringing the film to Blu-ray, but I don't know. I don't know if it's worthy of it in
Okay.
my opinion, but but it was fun enough. Like I think it might have been more fun to watch with in a group, so maybe
Right.
that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Maybe it has that kind of appeal because I could see Cliff and Giles being kind of quotable people. Like some of the lines are
Sure.
pretty fun. Um, but yeah, I don't know. As I say, I don't think it works for me. It's not one
Mm.
that I'll be revisiting for Christmas slasher season.
Yeah. So, do you want to talk about the Friday the 13th
Oh
connection?
yeah, so in the trailer that you sent me, and apparently it was a big thing in the back of the VHS. They piped up about from the makers of Friday the 13th. In fact, let me read the quote because it's quite a good quote. Where are we? From the makers of Friday the 13th comes the film that shatters all barriers of horror. Don't Open Till Christmas is the thrilling and bizarre murder mystery where nothing is sacred, even Santa Claus. Now, I can't remember. This was after a Silent Night, Deadly Night, but yeah, looking into it further, I was looking at the producers and I'm trying to figure out like who is it. But there's a producer who doesn't really even have like a Wikipedia page, so to see what else he's been worked on. But Stephen Manassian, I think it is pronounced, and apparently he was involved with Sean Cunningham's company like back then, like when Friday the 13th was made. Um, but not exactly. Even if I'm not sure his involvement, how deep it went with the film Friday the 13th,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly not from what you would think the makers of Friday the 13th. I mean, if you're
Right.
talking like,
Yeah, it's
I
a
don't know,
stretch.
the guy that drove the cast to the set in Friday the 13th technically helped make it, right? But so
Mm-hmm.
that's how they're getting around it. But it's a bit of a kind of falsehood that kind of certainly me disappointed me a little bit, like thinking because I kept thinking who the hell is involved with this? I'm looking at all
Right.
the, I looked at all the producers and I don't recognize any of these names. And even the production, distributed by 21st Century Film. Friday, Friday the 13th is Paramount. I'm thinking, nope, it's not that. They're not getting it that way. But yeah, it's a bit of a kind of interesting one that I don't think they would get away with in this day and age.
Do you know the Last House connection though? Did
Oh
you come
no,
across
no.
it? All right. I finding out a bit about Stephen Manassian.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was actually, I think, what Friday the 13th he put some money up for, but he actually got involved with Craven and Cunningham for Last House on the Left.
Right.
After it had been released, it wasn't doing that well. He was actually responsible for the tagline, "It's only a movie,"
Right. Well, that
and
okay.
renaming it Last House on the Left. That's what I
And
found
he's
out
also
today.
responsible for the tagline in this film as well, which is a pretty good
Right,
tagline.
it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, that's really cool. Yeah, that's interesting.
Um,
But
yeah. So
yeah,
Stephen
so
Manassian, he also produced Pieces and Slaughter
uh,
High.
I've seen
Um,
Slaughter High actually.
yeah.
Can't remember, I can barely remember it, but it's also British produced, I think. Um, but yeah, I feel it's a bit of a kind of, I don't know, it's a bit shitty to pipe it, but I suppose at that point in time, it's such a large, the slasher franchise genre was kind of just taking off properly and getting into the kind of peak of when these things were being made. So it was great to capitalize on that. As I said, it just makes me wish the film was just a little bit. Still, just a doesn't have to. I mean, I don't have that. You know me. I don't have that high a standard, but
Yeah.
just a little bit. A little bit better would have been great because I
Hmm.
think as I say, it's got some cool ideas, and it being shot in the UK and some of that acting is pretty good, and it's just a shame. As I say, it's a missed opportunity, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'd say, yeah, it's an interesting wee curio worth checking out for its few kind of idiosyncrasies that are slightly kind of unusual.
Mm,
But I think the direction ultimately lets it down in the end,
yeah,
and probably the production problems that it had didn't add to the help. But um, I think it's a fun little watch, not a
yeah,
classic, but
yeah, yeah,
one time through, it'll raise an eyebrow, I think.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
So Simon, how would you rate this amongst Christmas slasher films?
Um, Well, I mean, I was going to say, what do you mean the ones we've covered in the podcast, or all the ones I've seen? But I don't even have to ask that question. The
Right.
bottom, yeah,
Oh,
right at the bottom. I don't think that. Yeah, this is. I don't think I've seen. It's not again. Not. It's not terrible. It's just as Christmas slashers or Christmas horror goes. I think this is my personal bottom at the moment.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. What about yourself?
Um, I don't know. I maybe enjoyed this more than Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
Oofed.
Um,
That's
even
maybe fair enough. That's maybe fair
right.
enough.
Even though that one, the garbage day line, is more iconic and a better moment. But the rest of that film was a bit kind of lukewarm one. But
if anything, I'd say this film has at least maybe makes some more effort than that film for like, you know, what, 70% of it, like, you know, where it's just recycled footage from the first film.
yeah.
So that's fair.
I quite like Christmas Evil, thinking back.
Yeah, that's one I've been thinking about revisiting because I
Yeah.
wasn't too hot on it at the time.
Right.
But yeah, I kind of want to check that out again because I feel like I maybe just wasn't in the right headspace. Like I was expecting like a Silent Night, Deadly Night type slasher or whatever.
Yeah.
And even though it has elements of that, it's a different film. So maybe I need to give that another watch.
Yeah. What else we got? Apart from the Silent
We
Night
did Silent Night,
series.
Deadly Night, the
Yeah.
first one. How about that one?
That's pretty good. I was a bit lukewarm on it, as I remember, but amongst the Christmas slashers, it's probably one of the
Yeah.
best.
Don't know what else other than to
Oh,
slay.
Black Christmas.
Oh yeah, right. Whoa, geez, okay. Yeah, Black Christmas is probably like I mean, this sounds almost sacrilege, but it's definitely up there. Like for me, like just for the kind of feeling that it gives me that kind of Christmassy feel, I'd say that Silent Nights maybe up there, maybe takes over it sometimes. You know, might swap places, trade places with it. I think Black Christmas is a way better film, but yeah, those are probably my two fave Christmas horror films that I revisit quite a bit.
Yeah, Black Christmas. It's quite a strong one as well.
Yeah, that's coming out in 4K soon, actually, from Shout or Scream Factory. Yeah, I'd like to pick that up. But yeah, I don't know if I'd watch it again. Gary, would you check this out again?
Nah, I don't think I will.
No, if we were to get together, have a few beers, and say let's watch some kind of middling films that we've talked about in the podcast before that we maybe weren't too hot on. Yeah, I could see it maybe being in the list. You know,
That would be on that list.
Yeah.
Mediocre films for covered on the podcast list.
And we're drunk.
Yeah. So that'll do it for our discussion on Don't Open Till Christmas. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you've subscribed on YouTube, like the video, and hit the notification bell.
So thanks for listening. I've been Simon.
I've been Gary.
Keep it extreme. And Merry Christmas.